What does a day in the life of Jordan Peterson look like? Which is this very interesting day. Let's look at the day when you have to speak.
Mhm.
Preparing your mind, thinking of what you're going to talk about, preparing yourself physically, mentally to interact with the crowd.
Mhm.
Through the actual speaking, how do you adjust what you're thinking through? And how do you come down from that so you can start all again as a limited biological system?
Well, I'm usually up by 7 and ready to go by 7:30 or 8. And
Coffee?
no,
Nothing.
steak and water.
How many times a day steak?
That's all I eat.
How many times?
3 or 4,
3 or 4.
depending on the day.
Steak and water.
Steak and sparkling water. Yeah, so monastic asceticism, man.
Well, I did the proper. I usually eat just once a day. I did the proper Jordan Peterson last night. I just ate 2 steaks.
And how was that?
Was wonderful.
Yeah, well, if you have to only eat one thing, could be worse. So anyways, I'm ready to go at 8 because we're generally moving.
What does moving mean?
Flying.
You're constantly
flying somewhere.
Okay.
And we usually use private flights now because the commercial airlines aren't reliable enough, and you cannot not make a venue,
Yes.
right? So that's rule number 1 on a tour. You make the show.
Yeah.
So everything, and then rule number 2 is anybody who causes any trouble on the tour is gone because there is 0 room for error. Now, no, there's 0 room for unnecessary, unaddressed error. So because there's going to be errors. The guys I have around me now, if they make a mistake, they fix it right away. So, and that's great.
There's a lot of people relying on you to be there, so you have to be there.
Like 4,000 people typically.
Yeah.
So then I'm on the plane, and I usually write, or often, because there's no internet on the plane, and that's a good use of time. So I'm writing a new book, so I write on the plane.
Typing or handwriting?
Typing. Yeah, typing. And then we land and we go to, it's usually early afternoon by then, we go to a hotel. It's usually a nice hotel that's not corporate. I don't really like corporate hotels. My secretary and one of my logistics guys has got quite good at picking kind of adventurous hotels, boutique hotels. They're usually in the old parts of the city, especially in Europe, somewhere interesting. And so we go there, and then lunch usually. And sometimes that's an air fryer and a steak in the hotel room. And I leave a trail of air fryers behind me all across the world. And then Tammy and I usually go out and have a walk or something and take a look at the city. And then I have a rest for like an hour and a half or an hour, half an hour.
Like a nap? Or
just nap. I have to sleep for 20 minutes. And that's about all I can sleep. But I need to do that in the late afternoon.
That refreshes your mind.
Yeah. That wakes me up again for the evening. And then Tam has to sleep longer. She's still recovering from her illness. And so she has to sleep longer in the afternoon. And that's absolutely necessary for both of us, or things start to get frayed. And so then we go to the venue. And then I usually sit for an hour. If I'm going to lecture, I've been doing a lot of Q&As, and that's a little easier. But if I'm going to lecture, I have to sit for an hour. And then I think, okay, what question am I trying to investigate? I have to have that. That's the point. What mystery am I trying to unravel? It's usually associated with one of the rules in my book, because technically it's a book tour, but each of those rules is an investigation into an ethic, and each of them points to a deeper sort of mystery in some sense. And there's no end to the amount it can be explored. And so I have the question. The question might be something like, put your house in perfect order before you criticize the world. Okay. What does that mean exactly? What does house mean? What does put mean, that active verb? What does perfect and order mean? Why before you criticize the world? What does it mean to criticize? What does it mean to criticize the world? How can you do that properly or improperly? So I start to think about how to decompose the question.
And you start to think which of these decompositions are important to really dig into.
Yeah, well, then they'll strike me. It's like, okay, there's something there that I've been maybe noodling around on that I would like to investigate further. Then I think, okay, how can I approach this problem? I think, well, I have this story that I know. I have this story and I have this story, but I haven't juxtaposed them before. And there's going to be some interesting interaction in the juxtaposition. So I have the question, and I kind of have a framework of interpretation. And then I have some potential narrative places I can go. And then I think, okay, I can go juggle that and see what happens. And so then what I want to do is concentrate on that process while attending to the audience to make sure that the words are landing, and then see if I can delve into it deeply enough so that a narrative emerges spontaneously with an ending. Now, I'm sure you've experienced this in podcasts, right? Maybe I'm wrong, but my experience has been, if I fall into the conversation and we know about the time frame, there'll be a natural narrative arc. And then, so you'll kind of know when the midpoint is, and you'll kind of see when you're reaching a conclusion. And then if you really pay attention, you can see that's a good place to stop. And it's kind of, you come to a point, and you have to be alert and patient to see that. And you have to be willing to be satisfied with where you've got to. But if you do that, and then it's like a comedian making the punchline work. It's like, I've got all these balls in the air, and they're going somewhere. And this is how they come together. And people love that, right? They say, oh, this and this and this and this and this. Whack! Together. And that's an insight. And it is very much like a punchline.
Well, that's interesting because your mind, actually, I'm a fan of your podcast too, and you are always driving towards that. I would say for me in a podcast conversation, there's often a kind of Alice in Wonderland type of exploration.
Mm-hmm. Down the rabbit hole, man.
And then a new thing pops up. The more absurd, the wilder, the better.
Yeah.
Conversations with Elon are like this.
Yeah, I bet.
It's like, actually, the more you drive towards an arc, the more uncomfortable you start to get in a fun, absurd conversation because, I'm now one of the normies. No, I don't want that. I want to be, I want the rabbit. I want the crazy.
Yeah.
Because it makes it more fun. But somehow throughout it, there is wisdom you try to grasp at, such that there is a thread to.
Well, that's the thing, man. You're following the thread, eh?
Yeah.
The thread's the thread. Well, that's right. That's what we're trying to do. That thread is the proper balance between structure and spontaneity, and it manifests itself as the instinct of meaning, and that's the logos in the dialogos, and it really is the logos, and God only knows what that means. You know, I mean, the biblical claim is that logos is the fundamental principle of reality. And I think that's true. I actually think that's true. Because I think that meaning that guides you, well, here's a way of thinking about it. I've been writing about this recently. What's real? Matter. It's like, okay, that's one answer. What's real? What matters is real. Because that's how you act. Okay, so that's different than matter. It's like, okay, what's the most real of what matters? How about pain? Why is it the most real? Try arguing it away. Good luck. So pain is the fundamental reality. All right. Well, that's rough. Doesn't that lead to nihilism and hopelessness? Yeah, doesn't it lead to a philosophy that's antithetical towards being? The most fundamental reality is pain. Yes. Is there anything more fundamental than pain? Love. Really? If you're in pain, love and truth, that's what you got. And you know, if they're more powerful than pain, maybe they're the most real things.
When you think about reality, what is real? That is the most real thing.
Well, it's a tough one, right? Because you have to, because if you're a scientist, a materialist, think, well, the matter is the most real. It's like, well, you don't know what the matter is.
Yeah.
And then when push comes to shove, and it will, you'll find out what's most real.
Yeah. I feel like this is missing. Physical reality is missing some of the things. So of course pain has a biological component and all those kinds of things, but it's missing something deep about the human condition that at least the modern science is not able to describe, but it is reaching towards that.
Yeah, it
And
is.
it's the reason. One way to describe it, as you're describing, is the reason it's reaching it is because underneath of science is this assumption that there's a deep
Logos.
thing to this whole thing we're trying to do.
Well, there's two traditions, right? In some sense, there's two logos traditions. There's the Greek rational Enlightenment tradition. That's a logos tradition. And it insists that there's a logos in nature and that science is the way to approach it. And then there's the Judeo-Christian logos, which is more embodied and more spiritual. And I would say the West is actually an attempt to unite those two. And it's the proper attempt to unite those two because they need to be united. And I see the union coming in your terms. I talked to Frans de Waal, for example, about the animating principle of chimpanzee sovereignty. And that's pretty close biologically. Is it power? Because that's the claim, even from the biologists often. The most dominant chimp has the best reproductive success. It's like, oh yeah? Dominant, eh? You mean using compulsion? Okay, let's look. Are the chimps who use compulsion the most successful? And the answer is sporadically and rarely. And that's sporadically, for short periods of time. Why? Because they meet an unpleasant end. The subordinates over whom they exercise arbitrary control wait for a weak moment and then tear them into shreds, right? Every dictator's terror. And for good reason. And de Waal has showed that the alpha chimps, the males, who do have preferential mating access often, are often and reliably the best peacemakers and the most reciprocal. And so even among chimps, the principle of sovereignty is something like iterated reciprocity. And that's a way better principle than power. And it's something like, I've been thinking, what's the antithesis of the spirit of power? I think it's the spirit of play. And I don't know what you think about that, but when you have a good podcast conversation, you already described it in some sense as play. It's like there's a structure, right? Because it's an ordered conversation. But you want there to be play in the system. And if you get that right, then it's really engaging. Mm-hmm. And then it seems to have its own narrative arc. I'm not trying to impose that, even though that's another thing I don't do. I didn't come to this conversation at all thinking, here's what I want out of a conversation with Lex Friedman. Like instrumentally, I thought, I'll go talk to Lex. Why? I like his podcasts. He's doing something right. I don't know what it is. He asks interesting questions. I'll go have a conversation with him. Where's it going to go? Wherever it goes.
Embracing the spirit of play. So what you have this, when you're lecturing, you're going in front of the crowd.
Yeah.
You thought of a question.
Yeah.
You get on the stage. First of all, are you nervous at all?
I'm very nervous when I'm sitting down thinking through the structure initially, which is why my wife and I have been doing Q&As, and that's easier on me.
Yeah. It's the it's the way comedians are nervous. Like Joe Rogan just did his special this weekend. And so he now has to sit nervously like a comedian does, which is like, I have no material now.
Right.
I have to start from scratch.
When I was doing the lectures constantly instead of the Q&As, basically what I was doing was writing a whole book chapter every night.
Yeah.
And, now that's a bit of an exaggeration because I would return to themes that I had developed, but it's not really an exaggeration because I didn't ever just go over rote material, ever. So it's very demanding, and that part's nerve-wracking because I sit down, it's an hour before the show, and I think, can I do this? And, the answer is, well, you did it 1,000 times, but that's not this time.
Yeah.
It's like, can I come up with a question? Can I think through the structure? Can I pull off the spontaneous narrative? Can I pull it together? And the answer is, I don't know. And so then I get it together in my mind, I think, and that's hard. It takes effort and it's nerve-wracking. Okay, I got it. But then there's the moment you go out on stage and you think, well, I know I had it, but can I do it? No notes.
Yeah.
And then the question is, well, you're going to find out while you do it. And so then I go out on stage and I don't talk to the audience. I talk to one person at a time. And you can talk to one person, because you know how to do that. So I talk to a person, and not too long because I don't want to make them too nervous. And then someone else and someone else. And then I'm in contact with the audience. And then I can tell if the words are landing, and I listen. It's like, are they rustling around? Are they dead quiet? Because you want dead quiet.
I see. That's what focus sounds like.
That's
you're in it together then.
You bet. Well, and here's a good rule if you're learning to speak publicly. I never say a word till everyone is 100% quiet. And it's a great way to start a talk because you're setting the frame, eh? And if the frame is, well, I'll talk while you're talking, the message is, well, you can talk. This is a place where everybody can talk. It's like, no, it's not. This is a place where people paid to hear me talk. So I'm not going to talk till everyone's listening. And so then you get that stillness. And then you just wait because that stillness turns into an expectation. And then it turns into a kind of nervous expectation. It's like, what the hell is he doing? It's not manipulative. It's a sense of timing. It's like just when that's right, you think, okay, now it's time to start.
Well, the interesting thing about that nervous expectation is from an audience perspective, we're in it together.
Yeah.
I mean, into that silence, there's a togetherness to it.
Of course. It's the union of everyone's attention.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a great thing. I mean, you love that at a concert when it's not silence then, but when everyone's attention is unified and everyone's moving in unison, it's like we're all worshiping the same thing, right? And that would be the point of the conversation, the point of the lecture. And the worship is the direction of attention towards it. And it's communion because everyone's doing it at the same time. And so, I mean, there's not much difference between a lecture theater and a church in that regard, right? It's the same fundamental layout and structure. And they're very integrally associated with one another. One really grew out of the other. The lecture theater grew out of the church. So it's perfectly reasonable to be thinking about it in those terms. So after the lecture, we play a piece of music that is a piece of music that I've been producing with some musicians for a couple of books I'm going to release in the fall. Terrible books. ABC of Childhood Tragedy, they're called. Dark books. Dark and comical books. Terrible books. Heartbreaking illustrations. We set them to music, and so we play a piece from that. And then afterwards, I usually meet about 150 people to have photographs. And so each of those is a little...
Is there a little sparkle of a human connection that you have to...
A lot. It's very intense, 10 seconds with every person. You think, well, how can 10 seconds be intense? It's like, pay enough attention. It gets intense real quick.
Does it break your heart to say goodbye so many times?
It's like being in a wedding lineup, at a wedding that you want to be at. Mm-hmm. And everybody's dressed up. And that's so weird, Because I bought these expensive suits when I went on tour. And it broke my heart because I spent so much money on them. I thought, God, that's completely unconscionable. I thought, no way, man.
Yeah.
I'm in this 100%. And so I'm going to dress with respect. And like 60% of the audience comes in 2 or 3 piece suits. They're all dressed up. Then there's this line to greet me and they're all happy to see me. That's not so hard to take, although it is in a sense, right? Because normal interactions are pretty shallow. And you think, I don't want shallow interactions. It's like, yes, you do most of the time.
Yeah. It's intense.
It's very intense.
And I don't know if
you've had a taste of this, no doubt, because people recognize.
Yeah, but I also have, when a person recognizes me and they come with love and they're often brilliant people, one of the thoughts I have to deal with, one of the dragons in my own mind is, thinking that I don't deserve that kind of attention. And so...
Well, you probably don't.
Right.
But maybe
I don't.
You could.
So it's a burden in that I have to step up to be the kind of person that deserves that, not deserves that, but in part deserves that kind of attention. And that's like, holy shit.
It's crucially important too, because if someone comes up to you in an airport and they know who you are and they're brave enough to admire you or who you are attempting to be, and you make a mistake they will never forget it.
Yeah.
So it's a high stakes enterprise.
And the flip side of that, especially with young people, a few words you can say can change the direction of their life.
One way or another. And so I really have to watch this too in airports, because I do not like airports. I do not like the creeping totalitarianism in airports. They've always bothered me.
Yes.
They really bother me. And I'm an unpleasant travel companion for my wife sometimes because of that, although I think we've worked that out, thank God, because we're doing a lot of traveling. But most of the security guards and the border personnel, all those people, they know me. And as a general rule, they're positively predisposed to me. And so if I'm peevish or irritable, then, well, that's not good. It's not good. And so that's a tightrope to walk too, because I do not like that creeping totalitarianism. But by the same token, you know, if you're just one of the crowd, sometimes it's good just to be one of the crowd, and then you're a little irritable and people can just brush that off. But if you're someone they have dared to open their heart to, because that's what admiration is, and then you betray that, then that's they'll never forget it. And then they'll tell everyone too. So that takes a lot of alertness. And so Tammy and our life has got complicated, because in Toronto, for example, we can't really just go for a walk. It's always a high drama production, because always people come up and they have some heart-rending story to tell. And I'm not being cynical about that.
Yes.
It's a hard thing to bear, because people don't do that. They don't just open themselves up to you like that and share the tragedy of their life. But that's an everyday occurrence. And so when we go up to our cottage, which is out of the city, it's a relief, because as wonderful as that is, like I have a weird life, because everywhere I go, it's very weird. It's like I'm surrounded by old friends, because I walk down the street in any city now, virtually, and people say, "Hello, Dr. Peterson, so nice to see you." Or they say better things than that, very rarely bad things. One experience in 5,000, maybe, very rare, although you don't forget those either. Mm-hmm. But it's very strange. So,
and there's an intimacy. They know you well, and because they leap into, they avoid the small talk often.
Mm-hmm. They leap into familiarity.
It really is like it's an old friend, and it feels like that. For me personally, the experience is the goodbye hurts, because there's a sense where you're never going to see that friend again.
Right. And that's a strange thing, eh?
So to me, a lot of it just feels like goodbyes.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it is. You're right about that. And I mean, that's, I suppose, in some sense, part of the pain of opening yourself up to people. Because Tammy has been struck particularly. She said, "I really never knew what men were like." I said, "Well, what do you mean?" She said, "I cannot believe how polite the men are when they come and talk to you." Because it's always the same. The pattern's very similar. The person comes up. They're mostly men, not always, but mostly. And they're tentative and they're very polite, very, very polite. And they say, "I hope I'm not bothering you. Do you mind? Do you mind?" And I say, "They're not bothering me. And I'm doing everything I can to not be the guy who's bothered by that." It's like, who do you think you are?
Yeah. Yes.
You're the guy that, is famous and now is above that?
Yeah.
You don't want to be that guy.
No.
So you want to be grateful all the time when people open up like that. And so you got to be alert and on point to do that properly, like right away, because for you, it's 5 seconds or 10 seconds or 20 seconds, whatever it is. But for them, they've opened up. And so you can really nail them if you're foolish.
After the 150 people, how do you come down from that? How do you find yourself again?
Well, that was often when I got caught in Twitter traps, because I'm so burnt out by then from the talk and the audience interactions and the whole day, because it's a new city, it's a new hotel, it's a new 5,000 people, it's a new book chapter, it's a whole new horizon of ideas, and it's off to another city the next day. I'm so burnt out by then that I'm not as good at controlling my impulses as I might be. And Twitter was a real catastrophe for that because it would hook me. And then I couldn't, like I used to, when I was working on my book a lot, I used to call Tammy. I'd say, look, you have to come and get me. I can't stop. I can't stop. I got tired. And then I kind of, because it's part of a kind of hypomanic focus. Yeah. I couldn't quit. It's like, oh no, I'm still writing. I need to get away from this, but I couldn't stop. And so it's better to read something, a book.
Fiction, nonfiction.
Fiction. Stephen King. I was reading a lot of Stephen King when I was on tour last time. That was good. I like Stephen King a lot.
Great narratives.
Great, and great characterization, you know. So, and there's a familiarity about Stephen King's writing too, that he writes about people you know. And so I really found that a relief. And so that was useful. And that in order to tolerate this, let's say, or to be able to sustain it, well, that's taken a lot of negotiation on the part of Tammy and I, because she's dragged into this and, you know, her life is part of this, whatever this is. And she's had to find her way and has. For example, now she has a different hotel room than me when we travel. And she found that she didn't want to be on the tour this spring. And I was ill again for part of it, and that made it complicated. But she went away back home and she came back and she said, and she was nervous about it. She said, I think I need my own room. And part of me was not happy with that. It's like, what do you mean you need your, like, are we not married anymore? It's like, you need your own room. And she said, well, you know, I can't. She has to do exercises because she was really sick and she has to keep herself in shape. And she has to have some time to do that. And she does a lot of prayer and meditation and she needs the time. And she has her own podcast, which is going quite well. And she needs the time. And I trust her. And she said, well, I need this in order to continue. And I thought, well, okay. Like, if you need this in order to continue, yes. Because she went away and didn't say, well, I don't want to be on the tour. I don't want to do this anymore. She went away and prayed, let's say, how can I continue to do this? And that was the answer. And so she has her own hotel room. And that was a really good decision on her part. And she's very good and getting better all the time at figuring out what has to happen for her to make this sustainable. And all that's been is a plus, because I don't want to travel without her, and I don't want her life to be miserable, and I want her to be fully on board. And so she has to be properly selfish, like everyone does in a relationship.
Yeah, well, and you have to, not just that, this is a weird thing that you're doing, and you have to, both you and her have to figure out how to manage this very intense intellectual, social journey.
There's another element to it too that I didn't tell you about. So that was a typical day, but it's missing a big component, because usually we also have a dinner with like 30 cultural representatives, I suppose, 10 to 30 from each country, because I have a network of people who have networks who are setting me up with key decision makers in each country. And so then we have like an hour and a half of that. Now, sometimes that's on a day when I don't have a talk, but sometimes the talks are back to back. And so she also has to manage that and to be gracious. And then people are showing us exciting things and tours in the cities, and which is all like, it's a surfeit of wonderful.
Yes,
you know?
Exactly. But it's still, you have to be there for it. You have to be present for it mentally.
Yeah.
As a curious mind, as an intellectual mind. How do you get to sleep?
Fortunately, that is almost never a problem. Even when I was unbelievably ill for about 3 years, I thought about that a lot too, that I didn't do a really good job of explaining that while I was ill, because it appeared in some sense that the reason I was ill was because I was taking benzodiazepines. But that isn't why. I was ill and then I took them, and very low dose, and I took that for a long time, and it helped whatever was wrong with me. And it looks like it was an allergy, or maybe multiple allergies. And then that stopped working, and so I took a little bit more for about a month, and that made it way worse. And so then I cut back a lot, and then things really got out of hand. And so
there was a deeper thing.
Oh yeah,
in the
definitely.
benzo.
Oh yeah.
What can you put words to?
Well, I had a lot of my daughter, as everyone knows, has a very reactive immune system, and Tammy has 3 immunological conditions, each of them quite serious. And I had psoriasis and peripheral uveitis, which is an autoimmune condition, and alopecia areata, and chronic gum disease, all of which appeared to be allergy related. And so Michaela seems to have got all of that. And so that I think was at the bottom of, because I also had this proclivity to depression that was part of my family history. But I think that was all immunological as far as I can tell. So one of the things that's happened to me, I always noticed I really couldn't breathe. Like I could breathe about 1/5 as much as I sometimes could. And so I was always short of breath. And it looks like what that was perhaps was I was always on the border of an anaphylactic reaction, which is not pleasant. And that's hypersympathetic activation, no parasympathetic activation. I couldn't relax at all.
That's an immunological response.
Allergic response, yeah. So anyways, that was what seemed, now this, I don't like to talk about this much because it's so bloody radical and, I don't like to propagate it, but this diet seems to have stopped all of that. I don't have psoriasis. All of the patches have gone.
Yeah.
My gum disease, which is incurable, I had multiple surgeries to deal with it, is completely gone. Took 3 years. My right eye, which was quite cloudy, is cleared up completely. What else has changed? Well, I lost 50 pounds and like instantly and kept it off.
I should mention that I too am not a deep investigator of nutritional science. I have my skepticism towards the degree to which it is currently a science, because like a lot of complex systems, it's full of mystery and full of profiteers, the people that profit of different kinds of diets. But I should say, for me personally, it does seem that I feel by far the best when I eat only meat. It's very interesting. And I discovered that a long time ago. First of all,
how do you discover it?
So the discovery went like this. I started listening to ultra marathon runners about 15 years ago, and they started talking about fat adapted running. So I first discovered that I don't have to run super fast to enjoy running. That in fact, I really enjoy running at a slower pace. So that was like step one. It's like, oh, okay, if I maintain something called the MAF rule, which is a pretty low heart rate. If I maintain that, you can actually get pretty fast while maintaining a pretty slow average speed in general. Anyway, they fuel themselves on low carb diets. So I got into that. On top of that, they also fast often. So I discovered how incredible my mind feels when fasted. People call it intermittent fasting, but
that's an optimization of death, because when you fast, your body logically and obviously, if you think about it biologically, is, well, what does your body scavenge first? Well, damaged tissue. So I know the literature on fasting to some degree, and it's very compelling literature. If you starve dogs down, I think it's 20% below, rats too, below their optimal body weight, they live 30% longer.
Yeah.
That's a lot, 30%. Like it's like 30%. Yeah, 30%.
Well, there is aspect to a lot of these things that make me nervous, because I always feel like there's no free lunch, that I'm going to pay for it somehow. But there is a focus that I am able to attain when I fast, especially when I eat once a day. My mind is almost like nervously focused. It's almost like an anxiety, but a positive one, or one that I can channel into just like an excitement.
I wonder how much of that's associated with, well, imagine that signifies lack of food, which is not that hard to imagine. Well, maybe you should be a lot more alert in that situation, right? Yeah. Biologically speaking, because you're in hunting mode, let's say, not desperate, but in hunting mode. And God only knows, maybe human beings should be in hunting mode all the time.
Often, but we don't know that. So I wonder if it has a stress on the system that long-term causes the system to
It doesn't look like it.
It seems, in case of fasting, not. And then on top of that, I discovered that the thing I enjoy, I just don't enjoy eating fat as much. So I love eating meat when you talk about low carb diet. So I just discovered through that process, if somewhat fatty meat, but just meat, I just feel a lot of the things that make me feel weird about food, like a little groggy or like full or just whatever. the aspects of food that I don't enjoy, they're not there with meat, and I'm still able to enjoy company. And when I eat once a day and eat meat, at least in Texas, you could still have all the merriment of
Yeah. Yeah.
you have dinner with friends. Now I don't do this. You have a very serious thing that there's health benefits that you are very serious about. For me, I can still drink whiskey. I'll still do the things that add a little bit of spice into the thing.
Yeah.
Now, when you completely remove the spice, it does become more difficult.
Yeah, it's more difficult socially. And Tammy seems to only be able to eat lamb, although she might be able to eat non-aged beef. And that makes traveling complicated too, right? Because, well, for obvious reasons, it's like, really, that's all you can eat? Yeah, well, c'est la vie. And maybe that's a form of craziness, but